This was the conference room at the shooting gallery when we first started out. A lot of meetings and a lot of big plans in here. Kind of had these sort of blinds, these wooden blinds on the windows that look very noir. But it's just weird to be back here, see the old tree house where a bunch of us made movies, made plans, you know?
There was an energy of creativity and excitement that I haven't found since, really. It was they were great years. What are all these guns doing over here?
I don't know.
It was Sundance, it was Robert Rodriguez, it was Tarantino, and Jim Jarmusch, Spike Lee, Laws of Gravity, Sling Blade, Miramax. It was all like shotgunned at you.
All the big studio movies were still being made in LA, but there was this sense of real kind of DIY filmmaking happening in New York.
I had this great cast of actors. Everybody worked for free. It took us 8 months to shoot the film. I mean, it was the life-changing experience for me.
Shooting gallery very quickly became the hub of some of the most creative thinking, I think, in New York.
Lawrence Fishburne came in and did his movie. Al Pacino did his movie. Everyone wanted to know about the shooting gallery.
You know, not to knock any film schools, Purchase kids were a different breed.
Hi, my name's Bob Goss. I was one of the founders of the Shooting Gallery in New York City in 1991. Many of the guys originally involved in that endeavor were from my film college background, which was at SUNY Purchase. Whitney Rancic was a freshman student in the film program with me, and I met him very early on.
We were classmates. We would help each other with our films. He started in my freshman film. I shot a senior film, that kind of thing.
I went to SUNY Purchase, where a lot of folks, Whitney Rancic, Bob Goss, who started the shooting gallery, went, Nick Gomez.
My memory is that it couldn't have been a more ideal situation because these were all my friends and I was, for the most part, hanging out with them anyway.
The faculty was amazing, the other students were amazing, and it's really sort of like a conservatory education.
I think a lot of what brought us together was Hal Hartley and his role at that school and the amount of influence I had in terms of like someone who was doing it right. And then after we graduated from college, we struggled on the streets of New York trying to make it happen.
There were so many films that we worked on, it's so hard, and 3 o'clock in the morning under the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, that you share these remarkable, exhausting, sometimes exhilarating experience.
We knew how to put 16 millimeter through the camera, but as far as a larger understanding of what it made to, as a business sense, what it made to express ourselves or to make movies or to be legitimate in any way, we really had no idea.
Scene 6, take 1.
Indie movies are the movies. You know, the very first movies were indie movies. There were no studios. When we think of the classical indie filmmakers, well, on the one hand, you've got Orson Welles, Stanley Kubrick's first 3 films, which he made with the idea of breaking into the system. And then you have John Cassavetes. That inspired a generation of directors such as Scorsese, trying to make films in the street, about the street. In the 80s, you had the underground filmmakers. I think Jim Jarmusch, I think Susan Seidelman, or Spike Lee. Really terrific filmmakers came along and were working outside the system and sort of under the system and almost like grassroots movie making.
The whole independent scene in New York that started in the early 90s was very exciting, but I think it was ushered in by Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
You know, Sex, Lies, and Videotape proved that a young American could make a film for nothing, win the Palme d'Or, and it kind of heralded a new movement.
They tended to work in New York City, they tended to work outside of Hollywood, and they would get together, you know, like-minded people and cobble together a movie.
To me, independent at the time was DIY films. It was really hands-on. They were really handmade films.
It was a really exciting time. It felt like, we had a part ownership in the voice of independent cinema very quickly.
Now, it was around this time that our upperclassmate and friend Hal Hartley was making Unbelievable Truth.
The decision to make a feature film was really inspired by the success of Jarmusch and Spike and all these filmmakers who were arising at the time. We knew we could get some 16mm equipment, and then one day he was walking by the Chase Manhattan Bank on Madison Avenue, and it said, come in, free loans, blah, blah, blah. Loan, take a loan out, get a loan. So Hal walked in, filled out an application, and in an hour walked out of there with a $7,000 loan from the Chase Manhattan Bank. And I started going on a yellow pad. I'm like, we could shoot this. We had a remarkable constellation of talent in the crew and in the actors. I mean, in the acting, we had, you know, Adrienne Shelley, who would go on to be a writer and director in her own right. Danny Liner was on the crew. Whitney Rancic was on the crew. Ted Hope was on the crew. I was on the crew. I mean, between all those people, we've collectively probably made 25 or 30 films.
And you know, certainly once this upstart distributor, Miramax, bought The Unbelievable Truth, it felt like we were going to be invited to the party.
Because we saw ideally how it could work. Ideally how you can, with a little bit of money, you can collectively do something that's very, very positive, have a very positive experience, put it out there in a marketplace, travel to festivals, it comes out, it's reviewed. We too now can actually do this.
So the first project up was a movie for Danny Liner called Time Expired, which we shot at my place in Brooklyn.
And some big Italian guys tried to pick me up.
Oh, yeah?
Those gold chains and those hairy chests I like.
Oh, yeah?
And I told them no, because I'm saving myself for somebody really special.
Oh, yeah?
I feel like Time Expired was definitely one of the building blocks of the shooting gallery. It was very successful, went all over the world, it played at the Film Forum, you know, had a run there. It had Edie Falco and John Leguizamo, who were kind of starting to blow up after that.
Right after that, we did a movie that Bob directed called Student's Wife. At that point, it was Nick's movie, Wild Kingdom. Bob was producing, I was ADing.
There was an understanding that you had to have a certain amount of larceny in your heart, I think, or at least in our group, in order for it to make it happen. It seemed like legitimacy was never going to be, at least at that stage, part of what our paradigm was.
There arose a need for a space. We were working out of our bedrooms, out of our apartments, and it got old pretty quick. My girlfriend, Ingrid, introduced me to this guy, Larry Russo.
My family owns 359 Broadway, which is this space here, that the shooting gallery originated.
They walked me over to 359 Broadway and opened up the elevator, and I came out in what to me was an enormous, 4,000 or 5,000 square foot space. I put two and two together and saw, yes, there's a path here. I don't know where this path leads, but my gut, my intuition, every fiber of my being says, take this opportunity.
And being that I had like really no production experience except for like film school, I said, okay, you know, maybe we can work something out, because our space, if they're looking for space, I get an opportunity to see how they do things and learn.
I think I agreed to something like $300 a month for a year. I didn't think I could, A, handle the overhead, and also I didn't know how to market the space by myself. I had no clue, and I thought that this guy I had met on the Theory of Achievement short with Hal, that Ted Hope had produced, his partner on that was Larry Meistrich.
One of the PAs that worked for us was this guy named Larry Meistrich. And Larry came up to me after one day and just said, like, look, man, I don't have the time to work my way up this production ladder. I'm a producer.
We got together in the village where he lived and had drinks, and we had this long conversation about all his business models and things like that, which was, you know, he might as well have been speaking a dead Apache language. But I was terribly impressed. Larry provided me with a little bit of confidence that I could actually pull it off.
Larry was this entity that was brought into this collective, the shooting gallery when it was just starting, that was a money entity. He was a kid from Riverdale who traveled in a set of, you know, guys from money, chose to hook up with these young filmmakers because he saw a way in to the entertainment film world, which was, you know, I think a smart way in.
I got the sense that you know, Larry was like the guy who could make stuff happen. He had long-term plans. He had everything mapped out. I remember the 5-finger strategy that he spoke about. Like, you're gonna have crew, you'll have equipment rental, you'll have financing, production space, studio space. I forgot how many that was of the fingers. And then it was all gonna feed the distribution end.
Soon after that, I called Whitney Rancic.
Bob said, aside from being able to do your short here, I think this could be our new home. This is where we can actually make our movies. And I thought that was a great idea. But Bob said, you know, it's not just going to be with the people from SUNY, who will include some other people, and we're going to have a meeting.
I get a phone call from Nick. He says, hey, George, you know, Bob Goss and Whitney Rancic, they have a space down on Broadway, and it's verkauft.
So I get this call from George Feaster. It was like in the early 90s or whatever. George and I were really good friends at Purchase. He was an actor. And he says, you know, Dave, you got to come to New York. You know, it's great. You know, this Purchase Mafia. There's like a bunch of guys from Purchase who've got this space downtown.
All my Purchase buddies were endeavoring to put together this little film production space, I guess, best way to put it. And as Danny Liner once said, dreamin's for free.
We did everything together. And no matter what you did at Purchase, if you were artists, you painted, whatever, it didn't matter. So that family was back together again here, and this was our new home. If the toilet was clogged, didn't matter who you are, director, producer, whatever, you went and unclogged the toilet. You know, if the rats were running around, didn't matter who you were, you went and chased the rat down with the bat.
You know, I remember Bob saying, like, we'll bang this out in a night. I was like, you know, I'm thinking to myself, we gotta get painters in, it's gonna cost money. It's like, no, you get like a keg of beer. You know, the next day I come by and people are painting the walls and there's buzz going on, and I was like, this is cool.
We were out there collectively making no money, believing 100% in what we were doing, experiencing the joy of that, no matter how long the days were.
And my focus was, it's time for me to make my movie. So we're putting up sets in the back, painting party in the front, and Bob was going to be the star of my birthday cake.
Funny, over the top, you know, like a live action cartoon, and unlike anything I'd ever shot before. And Goss was like an insane Charlie Chaplin on acid.
And it was an incredible experience. I absolutely had a blast. Interestingly enough, we finished that movie, and I think the day after was our opening event, and it was fantastic. It was a great turnout, a lot of our SUNY friends, New York filmmakers. But it was there that I did notice a difference between the SUNY crowd and the Larry Meistrich crowd.
I'd barely known Larry 60 days. He brought the champagne to a party where we would have brought tall boys. Beyond that, I really thought what he was going to bring, what we needed, was money.
I felt, honestly, privileged to be able to be part of a group of people that seemed so capable and talented. And I was, in my opinion, I was learning from like exactly what I wanted to learn, which is how to do things from the ground up.
The Shooting Gallery is a home for the independent filmmaker in New York City. We're a conglomerate of young, struggling, independent filmmakers.
Some of the films,
Wrap it up. If you'd like to submit a tape to Short TV, send it to Shooting Gallery, 359 Broadway, New York, New York.
We had no freaking idea what was gonna happen here, but it was a cool vibe. It was kind of like, I guess, a throwback to the 70s. You know, it was a commune. That was our first name, the film commune.
When Good Machine started, when Shooting Gallery started, you know, when Killer Film started, I think everybody was excited to be able to get to make their work.
There was this group of us who were in New York City and we wanted to make movies. And we had this insane belief that we could actually make movies in New York, that we could stay there, and that our will to make movies and get them into Sundance, that was fledgling at the time, would enable us to somehow survive.
The first feature film we made was a film that Nick Gomez wrote and directed, which eventually was called Laws of Gravity.
Larry had said, listen, I can make this movie. And by the time sort of July came around, the money wasn't raised yet. I figured after 3 months, if we can't get $1 million, you know, who can?
When you bring in Larry Meistrich to fund the movies, which I think was, you know, and to be the kind of key financing entity in the inception of the Shooting Gallery, you know, I would say it changed right then, but it also created it. So Nick was able to get Laws of Gravity off the ground because Larry had money or was able to raise money.
I remember it really just being about the work, trying to figure out who these characters were, who they were to each other, what dialogue felt right and real and interesting, and it was a really tremendously creative time.
You know, what if we took a Bolex and a couple of clamp lamps? Can we do something for 30 grand? What would it take? We'll find a kick-ass DP to get it all done for us. That was sort of like the parameters that you gave me.
All right, motherfucker, look out. Enjoy yourself. Oh, shit.
Oh, God!
And the film was sold for like, was it 500 or something like that? Holy shit. You know, lotto, baby. 500 grand. We made it.
When it came out and it got the reaction that it did, it changed the air in the shooting gallery. It was an amazing feat of film production and filmmaking.
And I remember the moment we blocked the deal with Chris Blackwell. We were driving in a stretch limousine coming back from Philadelphia. One of the things Chris said to me, I never forgot, he said, stay true to what you're doing, stay true to your voice, and stay true to each other, because collectively you'll be more powerful than any one of you by yourself. I remember thinking that that was important. I didn't know quite what he meant yet.
The birth of this independent film movement in the States in the late 80s, early 90s changed the world of cinema. Sundance became that kind of premier platform where everybody could see it changing.
So all of a sudden, the agencies and kind of major distributors saw there's opportunities here, and things changed. It felt like overnight.
You mean all I need is $7,000? All I need is basically a chip on my shoulder and a willingness to just do whatever it takes to get the thing made?
At the granular level, people were swapping stories that actually carried vital information, as well as serving as examples for each other. Oh, you did, I can do that too. So it was pretty inspiring. I think you have to genuinely respect the fact that, yeah, when people made movies for $7,000, they did.
I can remember looking at the budget of Laws of Gravity and saying, I might be able to raise $25,000 through my father and some of his friends, and maybe that's what I should do. Maybe I should be thinking about making the low-budget indie.
We made this movie from our garage. I had 13 credit cards maxed out. I remember my investors and my parents saying, we would give you money to go to therapy, not to go help you go to Sundance.
But it also was a business plan. You make something cheap and you sell it for a lot of money. That's the kind of gold rush and wildcatter attitude that's been part of film business since the very beginning.
And we were suddenly legitimate in the eyes of the film industry, both in New York and Los Angeles. We got a 2-picture first look deal with Blackwell's company, Island, and we were kind of happening.
After Laws of Gravity, we did this tour of the studios. We couldn't even get it together to be presentable enough so that when we met with the head of Paramount, they didn't think we were complete knuckleheads. Because the fact of the matter is, we were complete knuckleheads. We were drinking tequila all day, smoking weed, going from meeting to meeting, getting lost.
And we were basically, after selling the film, within 6 months, we were broke again.
I finally cornered Bob, and I said, look, man, it's time to make another movie.
Whitney came to me with a script he had written called Handgun. At this time, Larry said, okay, let's go, let's start prepping. Whitney had gotten Treat Williams, got Paulie Schultz and Seymour Cassell, and suddenly we were up and running again. Still a deferred movie, but we had real, credible screen actors, and actually made a great little genre film.
Coming out of this sort of studio world, I felt alive. I love the sense of anarchy. I love the sense of, freedom, and I love the sense of theatricality.
For me, it was exactly why I wanted to be part of the shooting gallery. It was an incredible experience, and without Bob there producing Laws of Gravity and then coming on board my film to produce my film wouldn't have happened.
We went to the Berlin Film Festival. We met Spike Lee, who had seen our film Laws of Gravity. He wanted to make a movie with us because he had a new deal with Universal Gramercy. at that time, and Nick basically wrote New Jersey Drive. This was a big studio movie by our standards, which meant we had Teamsters, we had Winnebagos, we had trucks, and it was a union job.
You know, when I first showed up on the set of New Jersey Drive and saw all the trucks and all the crew and all the PA and all that kind of stuff running around, I was just like, this is not where I want to be. It's blocks and blocks and blocks of closed streets. I just wanted to sort of have a nice little, we all sit on milk crates again.
And at the time, Spike wasn't available to us to fight our battles, so we were left to our own devices to fight these battles, and didn't always win, and Nick was more than willing, just to get through it, would compromise. And I think at the end of the day, when we finished New Jersey Drive, we were not in the mood to do a studio movie anytime soon.
The truth of the matter was, I was finding myself more and more as an outsider of what was going on the production end of the shooting gallery.
It's when I started having problems with the shooting gallery, specifically with Larry. I wasn't happy with the business side of things.
The people who worked at the shooting gallery changed over time. Chris Walsh went away. Eli Cabilio went away. George Feaster went away. Larry Russo went away. Eventually Whitney went away. So just about all the original people who started it were gone.
And realizing that the upside of what was going on in the shooting gallery was not looking good, I came in and I told everybody, you know, in 3 months, the space is not going to be available anymore.
We moved to Larry Meistrage's apartment over in the West Village. It was weird. This was a problem because nobody was together anymore.
In this time period, Larry had taken control of what we would call the shooting gallery in that form at that time. My role was broadly defined as the creative. He was the head of the company in terms of business, and David Tuttle running the day-to-day. And stock was issued so that we partially owned the company. We had ownership in it.
Things had changed a lot. We were in better building, you know, with real elevators, and we had a full office of people working, so it was a lot different.
The shooting gallery was a means to an end. You know, I wanted to make movies, and if this was my path to make them, then the shooting gallery is my path. I think perhaps Larry's way was to make money.
Around this time, a guy named Steve Carless joined the company, who I had met a couple of times in the past. He was a childhood friend of Larry's, who was at the time working for Merrill Lynch. And Larry was like, all right, he's going to raise money through his Wall Street connections. He's our finance guy. He's going to be the CFO.
Steve Carless was a crony of Larry's. You know, he's a guy, you know, they're cut from the same ilk, you know, New York Wall Street guys who were into making money. And Steve's take was making money.
It was no longer the inmates had taken over the asylum that had existed at 359 Broadway, where all the filmmakers were running around running the place. Now, with Steve and the responsibility to this financing, and Larry having a vision for the company to really expand, now came a different sort of every division operating as a satellite on its own.
We were no longer the guerrilla filmmakers, but we were a production company for hire.
Around this time, I got tagged to do The Last Home Run, which was the first gun-for-hire adventure. We were being paid as a corporate entity to line produce and direct and execute and deliver through post this man's feature film about children and baseball and all this.
So I made Last Home Run. I came back from Florida and edited Last Home Run, and I was now a director. We finished The Last Home Run. I got a script from William Morris Agency from Mary Maher called Niagara by a young playwright in New York City. I was immediately smitten with the script. I thought it was side-splittingly funny in a dark way.
Do you know where there's a liquor store around
Let's
here?
get the foul-mouthed bitch out of here right now. Go on.
Oh! Don't you ever talk to him like that!
Get out of my store!
I can't stress to you enough how much that particular film changed my life personally, because, wow, these are filmmakers, and this is exciting. This is an artistic endeavor.
But it was amazing. It was the first time we'd shown Niagara to the public, and the Italians really loved it. And it was really magical. It is a different experience to sort of feel like you're giving the film away, and you're showing it to people who love movies. It's the best part about doing independent films.
Larry came to me one night in the camper, and we watched a short film that the William Morris Agency had provided for him called, some folks call it a Sling Blade, by George Hickenlooper, written by a guy named Billy Bob Thornton.
I think Sling Blade was originally budgeted at $5 or $10 million. And Larry had this thing. He's like, we're raising money until this point. And by this point, no matter how much money we have, we're making the movie. And I was like, this is the guy I want to hang out with, because at least I know something's going to get made. And everybody's going to put their all into what's going on.
We knew we had something special. I mean, reading it was one thing, but just seeing it come together. I mean, just the people who worked on it were great, the actors were great, and just watching the dailies. And Billy was just, he was in control.
And they said, you know, we're making this movie, and we're out of money. You know, I said, how much money do you need? And they said, oh, you know, we need $60,000. Out of politeness, I took the movie home, and I really wasn't sure I was even going to watch it. But, you know, it was raining. I popped it in the VHS, and it was Sling Blade. And it was amazing. And I was astonished.
How far are you going with them sack full of wash?
Half a mile, I think it is.
I had seen a cut of Sling Blade, and I was blown away. I had to watch it twice in a row after I got the cut, because I thought this is an American masterpiece of sorts.
I remembered what independent films were supposed to do, and I really thought that they had delivered on that, and that the movie deserved life.
We were running out of money, so we were now in panic mode, and I knew if we could get the buyers to screen Sling Blade before London, we'd probably have a 50-50 shot at selling it.
What was arranged that Harvey would they would hand deliver a tape to Paris, where Harvey was, to see the film at the same time as, he would get there at the same time as the 7 o'clock New York screening. So Harvey's watching it with Treya Hoving, and he's calling me up.
This is fantastic. This film's great. We got to get this film. You know.
Okay, so we're in Rifkin's office at William Morris, and he asked us, well, how much are you guys looking to sell the Sling Blade for? And Larry said, $5 million. And I blurted out, domestic. And so Rifkin goes, well, how much for foreign? And Larry said 5. And we didn't look at each other, just kind of threw it out there. He said, if you guys sell this for $10 million, you'll be the Bruce Springsteens of independent film.
Bob is on the phone to Harvey, and then Bob just puts his phone down and goes, okay, we got it. We already locked it up. And I say to Scott Greenstein, who was the head of business affairs for Miramax at the time, I was like, what do they pay? He goes, $10 million. I was like,
None of us imagined getting that kind of money, and it skyrocketed us, I think, to a different level.
And the Oscar goes to Billy Bob Thornton for Sling Blade.
My mom, my wife, Larry Meister's at the Shooting Gallery.
The Sling Blade suddenly became like the film that was on a pedestal of what everybody who wanted to make an independent film aspired to. It was a great story, it was a great character. It was somebody who was really taking a risk as an actor and doing something very different.
So there we were, you know, we were at the apex. I mean, we were at the top of the mountain. We had this beautiful movie, had been so gorgeously reviewed and received, and it seemed like anything was possible.
The spirit of the company was really fun when I got there. There were roughly 15 of us, and everyone was really smart, really hardworking, and really committed.
Everyone wanted to know about the Shooting Gallery. Everyone wanted to be involved. Everyone wanted to somehow find, you know, a connection to the company.
Steve Carless realized he would be better served for a model where he wanted to make multiple films at the same time if he had a pool of capital available to make more than one movie.
By luck, he happened to put a couple of very, very powerful and rich men into Sling Blade. These guys made like 800% on their investment. They were laughing and brought all their Wall Street friends to the party,
The shooting gallery was an object of fascination out in those agent rooms and in like all these producers and players and stars. They really were like, oh, those guys don't give a shit. Wow, oh.
There was suddenly this heat and excitement and vitality about independent films, and actors wanted to do them.
It ends up being so gorgeously pure. And I've been really, really lucky, both as a director, but particularly as an actor, working with people like Miguel Arteta on The Good Girl, Finn Taylor on Cherish.
Really big name actors, A-list actors, calling us up, saying they were interested in working with us. It was just this wonderful time where suddenly everyone wanted to be relevant in the way that we were relevant.
Independent film became incredibly popular. It was the place to be. And Shooting Gallery very quickly became, the hub of some of the most creative thinking, I think, in New York.
We called it a film hotel. You could come in, you could use their screening room, you could set up an editing room, you could set up a development office and grow and do everything, soup to nuts.
Their basic business model meant that there were very high-profile people attached to the films.
I think there was so much momentum behind this company that Steve and Larry, most importantly, I literally think they thought they were invincible.
I remember one meeting where Carlos goes, guys, in a year from now, we're going to be $1 billion company, and you know what? I didn't completely discount it.
The goal for me really never didn't really move away from anything short of making another movie. If I felt like I had something to say, then I was pursuing that as laser focused as I could. Meanwhile, trying to figure out how to take the shooting gallery to the next level.
And I think that was Bob's idea, that like these New York filmmakers would have a place where they could bring anything and make a movie. That was his idea. I don't think he thought about slates of films and post facilities and taking over the world.
In the mid-90s, there really was a very critical turning point, and that was when Miramax, the scrappy little indie, became flush with Disney cash. Pulp Fiction did $110 million domestically. The money people got very excited that you could mint money with this new crazy indie thing. It was really kind of a gold rush. When the Sundance Festival really took off, there's an entire planet of people just waiting to be in the film business, and when they hear that you can get in for 100 grand instead of $40 million, it does create a kind of frenzy. You saw everybody trying to create what we call boutique labels, and you saw a lot of independent companies springing up, companies out in LA from the studios, and then New York companies like Shooting Gallery.
Larry at that time now was a mogul. He was like, Goldwyn. He had everything.
Go big or stay home. I have to tell you, this really fed into what Larry and Steve believed all along. They weren't interested in making great movies. They were interested in making a lot of movies and being important. And I don't mean artistically important. I mean, they wanted to be Harvey Weinstein. They wanted to be a guy that, when they walked down the street in Hollywood, everybody would turn their heads and say, I wish I was you.
I think everyone suffers from this level of delusions of grandeur that when you get across the castle walls, that you're welcome, or that you did it based only on your good grace, or brilliance or talent.
The problem was that momentum wasn't really justified by the commercial success of the movies they were making. So they diversified.
We were talking about buying makeup houses and special effects houses. It was just really weird things that we'd never really even used in the films that we made.
It's getting crazier and crazier. Around this time, we bring in Jonathan Marshall to be our head legal. To our surprise, a couple weeks later, Jonathan turns up and he's dating Monica Lewinsky. Next thing you know, Monica's wearing a shooting gallery hat and it's on the cover of the New York Times. And Larry sees this and he gets the idea that he wants to brand the company and with merchandise.
I don't know what was going on, and we were trying to do concerts, and every day was like a new bizarre day in the world of me. Like, it was like, what do we do? The company was so clearly confused.
Business, spelled B-I-Z-N-E-S, is not filmmaking. You know, everybody's, you're doing this and this and this and flipping that and raising money for this and building the biggest studio in the East Coast, whatever it is, announcements and parties and stuff, that's not making movies.
What was initially there, a bunch of SUNY purchase students all getting together, was now gone. And now it's just all about money and all about how really the air of exploitation was just everywhere.
The way in which Sundance changed was, I think, reflected a change in attitude in the industry as a whole. What was before these quirky independents over there, and all of a sudden it was like a business.
I just think the tenor was different, like what the expectations were in terms of selling films and what you could do with a film and what was considered a failure and what wasn't considered a failure.
Suddenly, instead of being a surprise hit, you had to hit a number.
Indies are always going to be the purview of startups. As soon as it gets big enough, it wants to play in the big game, as David Mamet called Hollywood movies. You know, it's the big table in a casino.
Harvey was given a lot of money to play with and decided to play in the big leagues and make big movies. So on a big scale, it was really getting into choppy waters, and almost paralleling it perfectly, but on a smaller scale, was the Shooting Gallery, where it started with a nucleus of creativity. It had an infusion of capital, and at that moment, it kind of went off the rails, certainly went off the rails if you go back to the beginning of the company.
Those companies which embrace indies and want to define themselves as such, as soon as they taste a bit of big budget money, profits, then, you know, it's out the window.
It is always dangerous in our realm getting into business with people who aren't first driven by their love of movies. I've seen it time and again without naming names, because every single one in these four walls, and probably all of us, could be making more money doing something else. So when you've got someone who's got an angle to make a lot of money doing this, and it comes first from that rather than just a knowledge and love of cinema, it's a dangerous recipe.
Larry didn't really care about art. When I would say, but Larry, there's this beautiful script and there's this story and we should get the option on this, show me how it's gonna make money. That's all I wanna know. You know, are you gonna get rich off of your aesthetics?
After Niagara, my role in the company had changed. I was really a figurehead. I didn't have any control.
Then with the whole internet starting to take off, there was some thought about, we gotta get in on this somehow. We gotta create some sort of big media company. We need content. We need a production portal. That productions need to have their dailies and everything online, and we need to create everything. We just need content.
The Shooting Gallery began to consult with investment bankers, people who specialized in internet startups. And they had an angle, which is that they were in media. And the internet world, for whatever reason, was being called new media. So their idea was, we're already in media. Maybe we can be in new media.
I remember when Carlos came in after a meeting at Razorfish and said, for every $1 that you can make in film, you can make 10,000 in the internet. And that was really the start of the rapid change. All of the old school film people at Shooting Gallery stayed in those roles as the train left the station with Carlos at the helm.
Stephen Carlos by now had this grand scheme on a white grease board, was drawing this diagram of this portal is going to require this kind of content for the production wing. I said, Steve, yeah, I get portals and content, but what specifically, if you're asking us to create the content, what kind of content are we talking about? Carlos said, content doesn't matter. Intuitively, I knew something was very wrong. I couldn't honestly say that I knew the company was doomed at that moment, but in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong.
We went for a long time, there's just a few of us, and then for a good many years, there's 10, 12 people, and then it just exploded. We took over a floor, then 2 floors, then we had 4 floors in the building, and all of a sudden we had over 200 people.
All knuckleheads, handpicked by Carlos and Larry to take us to the next huge level of new media. And I knew we were dead then.
Larry, I think that he got to a place where his intellect couldn't actually deliver against this new demand of growing a big company. Instead of having discussions about what to do next, he got very much inside himself. We had a music meeting with the director, Kenny Lonergan, and I walked into Larry's office because I knew that he wasn't prepared and said, have you watched the cut? And we need to, specifically in the bar scene, he wants to talk about the music track. So I'll put that up because I watched it. And he was actually databasing his baseball cards.
Where was Larry? Was he really making the decisions at that time? I don't think so. Carlos took care of Larry.
Problem with Steve is that once the shooting gallery had grown to a certain point, his confidence in himself and his own, genius, his own ability to know how to do things that other people didn't know how to do, was just eclipsed by the nuts and bolts demands of managing the finances of a large and complicated operation.
We had some movies that we had developed that were ready to go, some with some quite well-known directors, which at that point was a real sort of elevation for us. And Carlos would say, we don't have the money.
A group of us, I think me and Eamon and Bob Goss, all sitting around a table, started to recognize we weren't making movies. And we certainly were making good movies.
It just was clear how much money we were spending. We were hemorrhaging money. There was no way we weren't. Who are all these people?
5 months before the end, Larry pulled me aside and said, we're in really big trouble. And John Marshall confirmed the fact that there was a huge cash flow shortage.
Our company began to be, starting the stage of Enron. We started I could tell that we were being grossly overvalued. Our services that weren't even developed were being sold as being developed. And then we're developing all these other quasi businesses to make us look like some huge, global media producer.
We essentially rented computers and desks and had film PAs sitting at desks to give the appearance that the company was a thriving internet company. In other words, this was a fake internet company.
What I found more surprising is that this Canadian mining company decided to pay $30–40 million for a company they never audited properly. I mean, what were they doing? And that Steve and Larry were able to sell it to these knuckleheads.
Jonathan Marshall came to me and he said, I'm worried because Larry is worried that Idamus is going to find things about the shooting gallery that they don't like.
Another accounting company, Deloitte, came in and did the books, and I could see it, man. There was panic.
I got a call from Jonathan Marshall again, and he said, Keith, there's a big problem here with the finances. And they told me a story which was an encyclopedia of every bad thing that a guy could do in financial management. I'm talking about Bernie Madoff kind of mismanagement. And fooling everybody. Fooling the auditors who produced audited financials year in and year out. Fooling the banks that made a big loan. Fooling the board. Fooling Idamus who just made an investment. It just seemed too ridiculous. So I got on the phone and said, Steve, I got Jonathan Marshall sitting in my living room, and they're saying some things that you need to respond to. And he talked for 45 minutes, and I couldn't make sense of 3 consecutive sentences. And I knew that something was really wrong.
And I could see Larry was shaken to his core. In fact, I'd known him for a long time at that point. I had never once, not once, ever seen him that frightened.
I think when we found out that there was criminality involved and criminality involved at the top, I think that was just heartbreaking. I think that was just heartbreaking for a lot of people.
Right after that, about a week later, we had a huge end of the year Christmas party, and the mood at that party was pretty fucking grim. And Larry came over to me and he says, we all got to go off payroll, you know, because this Idamus thing's not going to go through unless we cut our nut completely. And I said, all right, well, fine, you know. And then my next thought was like, well, how am I going to pay my mortgage? I basically just locked up my office and I got a job driving actors around for the Teamsters. And I remember the first day on the Woody Allen movie, the first person I picked up was Treat Williams, who I had produced Handgun with. Treat was out in front of his apartment on the Upper West Side. And I honked the horn and I go, Treat. And he goes, Bob, what are you doing up here? I go, nothing, what are you doing? He goes, I'm waiting for a Teamster to pick me up. I got a job in a Woody Allen movie. I'm like, yeah, I'm him, get in.
Idamus was funding us at the time. They were giving us capital and said, we ain't paying anybody. You're done. We're pulling the plug. We got no cash.
I got a call from somebody saying, like, did I want to buy an Avid cheaply? You know, and I was asked, what's going on? And, you know, why is that? And they said, oh, well, the shooting gallery can't pay anyone, and they're being told, employees are being told to take whatever they can get their hands on, and so has an Avid, and did I want to buy it? You know, it was like, what is happening here?
Then Friday, of course, that famous meeting with us all called to Larry's office, and Larry in tears and couldn't look at anyone in the face or in the eyes, and told us it was over.
To go so quickly from such a small group for so many years to expand into that space with so many floors, and then to start to just like have the air sucked out of it, and wandering around this office with a skeleton of people. It was just a surreal. It's hard to believe that I was over after all those years.
Then I had to do the hardest thing in my fucking entire life. I had to sit before all the people who were my family, who I worked with every day for a long time, and tell them that they were out of work. And I didn't have anything for them. I didn't have the last fucking paycheck for them, you know? And that really fucked me up. You know, that really fucked me up, that I had to do that.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Susan Sandberg. The innovative film production company, the Shooting Gallery, has closed its doors after a decade of independent hits and an edgy reputation. The Shooting Gallery began in a loft in Manhattan. It grew into a diversified small studio.
It was a very smart group of people, led by a guy that believed he was the smartest one in the room. We didn't stand up for what we really believed in, which was we could create a legacy of a motion picture business that had the same integrity as it started. And it wouldn't have been the Weinstein Group, and it wouldn't have been Lot 47. It would have been Shooting Gallery.
That was a very sad moment. It also sent a shiver down everyone's spine, because I think if Larry couldn't land on his feet, you know, if the cat had finally lost its ninth life, then which life were we on?
It was all starting to unravel. I think of Shooting Galleries unraveling around the turn of the century as emblematic of what was happening in almost every other corner of American filmmaking.
It was an artificial bubble, that the normal state of affairs of independent films wasn't what was being created by Searchlight and Warner Independent and Big Focus and even Miramax of Harvey, but that was a sort of, you know, independent films on steroids.
It's remarkable how much had been accomplished in independent film in America and how much had been lost at the same time, how much it had changed in one decade.
You know, for a long time, I forgot about until you guys asked me to come in, and I started looking at some of the pictures and, you know, the stuff that you guys sent me. What a wonderful thing the Shooting Gallery was.
If there are any opportunities lost or anything to glean from the entire episode of the rise and fall of the Shooting Gallery, this community was successful as long as it was a community that had a common purpose. A collective effort like making a film is through a sense of community and singular purpose and leadership and inspiration and compassion, and it doesn't get any better than that.
And I also feel now more than ever, with how crowded the market is and how hard it is to get eyeballs, whether it's in the theater, downloading from iTunes, whatever, we have to be more original than ever.
We're in the best place we've ever been in terms of the cost of production and in terms of the cost of marketing. Cost-contained storytelling with a specific audience, I think the opportunities have never been better.
I think what's going to happen is that as soon as that distribution system starts to get in place and the old model has rested in peace, you're then going to have a new Larry who's going to come out and is going to start going, hey, we can make all these movies together and we're going to be able to make a lot of them and we're just going to make 100 a year and distribute them through this new network. And
yeah, I think independent films changed a lot. I think it's time for us to make a return. I do. I really do. I feel like right about now.
One of the things that I find really exciting, as hard as it is to earn a living these days, making art, as hard as that is, I think it still puts it back in that way it was in the beginning. That it's no longer a profession. You're here because you are an amateur, because you have a love, for this first and foremost.
It's not even that you have to want to do it. You have to need to do this. You have to have that burning desire to tell your story no matter what.